Is our block fighter game we made in Swift GameKit. So at the start we have a bunch of variables which sets up our fighters or punch buttons and a bunch of different things like the blocking conditions and the health. Next we have our did move override function which creates the start menu on when the app opens. Then there's the override function for touches began, which basically just detects if a user presses on the screen, and then it checks if there's a button at those different points. So if it sees that there's a button press, if at the press point there's a button with a certain name, it'll induce a certain action. For example, if it's pressed on the screen and there's a button called continue button there, it runs the start game function. There's a bunch of different functionalities like that throughout that function. Next is the update override function, which checks for when the different characters are blocking, and then it runs the blocking animation. The next function is the check winner function, which essentially just checks for when different player healths are at 0 to determine who is winning the game. And then the game over function is an additional part next after that, which displays different winner text depending on who wins the game.
Alright, we have over here is the start game function. When it's called, it removes all the nodes, and then it creates the background, the pause button, the fighters, and it also updates the health bars and creates all the buttons that are created in the code. And then we have the instructions view. It creates a rectangular shaped node with the text explaining the button functionality and how it basically works. And then we have the update health bars, and when it's called, it removes the health bars, and then it will recreate them with updated size depending on the health variables. And then we also have the pause menu. It basically creates a view with that which allows players to continue game or return home. And then we have the create pause button, which creates a button on the game scene which goes to the pause menu, and then you can press the button which basically resumes the game.
Next we have a make start menu. This creates the start menu with a start button and a instructions button. The instructions button brings you to the instructions view talked about earlier, and the start button starts the game by creating all the sprites. This is also where we created the background. So in create background in the function, we loaded in a texture, and then we made actions to move that texture so it looks like the background is moving. We also have create buttons, and this is just a helper function to simplify the code, make it look better. In create fighters, this creates the sprite nodes for the 2 fighters, and we loaded in an idle animation by using an array with different textures that I created, and it just cycles it with actions as well. And for the punch buttons and the block buttons for both fighters, it was basically the same thing. I followed the same framework while coding it, and I would basically just create the button and then load in textures for the fighter for like a punch or a block, and created an action as well.